welcome to the i24NEWS National Security Podcast, in partnership with INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. I'm your host, Nicole Zedek. Each week, we're bringing you an in-depth discussion with expert analysts on some of the most pressing national security challenges facing Israel today. So, let's get started. Today, we are tackling the head of the octopus when it comes to the axis of resistance, Iran. Iran has long been clear on its intent to harm Israel, even unveiling a doomsday clock on the streets of Tehran back in 2017 that's been slowly counting down to the destruction of Israel, set for just 16 years from now, the year 2040. Now, since October 7th, the shadow war between the two countries has been brought to light, with Iran using its proxies like Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, all to fight Iran's war against Israel. This week, Iran itself is once again threatening retaliation against the Jewish state after its ambassador in Lebanon was injured when a wave of Hezbollah pagers exploded. But why was the Iranian ambassador carrying a Hezbollah communication device in the first place? Could this latest security breach in Lebanon be enough to ward off the Iranian regime or further ignite flames in the region? When it comes to this proxy warfare, we need to examine how it plays into Tehran's larger regional strategy. What more can be done to combat this growing threat? And how exactly does Israel play into Iran's larger goals? Well, to answer all of these pressing questions and more, I am joined now by Danny Citrinowicz, research fellow at the Iranian program at the INSS and former head of the Iranian strategic branch for the Israeli Defense Intelligence. Danny, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Quite a lot to unpack, and we're going to dig into more of these latest developments. But before we can talk about how we got here, I think it's important to give a little bit of context, some history. For decades, Iran has been building this army of proxies to combat Israel on all of the different fronts. But it's also all part of this bigger strategy to really have a presence in so many different countries throughout the Middle East.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when looking at the proxy warfare, it's important to say that it's coming from the bigger strategy of Iran. And we have to embed that as well. I think that it's important to say that Iran, first and foremost, thinking about how to secure the regime towards the future. This is the main goal of the regime itself, definitely after '79, the Islamic Revolution. And for the revolution, for the regime itself, it's important to distance any war from the Iranian borders. This is why proxy warfare works great, because at the end of the day, Iran is paying, sending ammunition, weapons, sophisticated one to its proxies all over the Middle East, and thus actually deterring Israel, deterring the US from attacking Iran. But if push comes to shove and there is a war, like it's happening now in our northern and southern border, Iran is not intervening in that in a way that nobody is threatening to attack Iran. This is why the proxy warfare is a complete solution for Iran strategic problems. And Qasem Soleimani was able to build that in a way that actually building some sort of what we call a circle of fire around Israel to deter Israel from attacking Iran, and actually Iran winning both ways. It's actually threatening Israel, but not paying any price for it.
It certainly seems, like you said, having some sort of a large say in this war as it's fighting all of it with its proxies. But it goes even further than that in some of the cases, specifically Syria and Lebanon. Not only do we have these large masses of military units, but also the Iranians have really embedded themselves not only in the security elements, but in the political elements as well. We got a little bit of a glimpse of that this week when the Iranian ambassador was injured by holding a Hezbollah communication device.
Yeah, well, the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon is usually, when you check at his background, it's obvious it's not exactly a diplomat. In a way that, for sure, there is a close coordination between the Iranian Foreign Ministry and Quds Force. So we shouldn't be surprised that he had this kind of communication. That's for sure. Well, I would surprise if he didn't have this beeper or the walkie-talkies. So I think it's obvious to say. It's interesting to see that, but I think it goes along with the fact that when you're looking at the Iranian, let's say, diplomatic activity within the Middle East, it's obvious it's embedded within Quds Force activity in the Middle East, and you can't differentiate between the both. So I think in that regard, I think it's another indication justification for that. But I think what you said is interesting in the fact that Iran is looking, when you talk about proxy warfare, it's not only building the proxies in terms of ammunition, in terms of the kinetic abilities. This is one important thing that we see in Lebanon, we see in Syria, we see in Iraq, and of course we see, unfortunately, in Houthis in Yemen. But also how to build them politically, that will have the political influence. Because as we see, for example, in Iraq, it's important for Iran that Iraq won't be a threat to Iran like it was in Saddam Hussein area. In order to do so, you have to build the Shiite militias also politically, that they will threaten the Iranian government, making sure that it won't threat Iran, won't make actions or take action that will be counterproductive to Iranian interests. That is why the political aspect in building the proxy is equally important for building them kinetically.
So this is the proxy warfare that is often most talked about when it comes to Iran, but there's another large section of warfare also, and that's the cyber warfare. Iran was one of the first states to formulate a national cyber strategy. They continue to try and instill different weaknesses, not only in Israel, but in all of the different Western powers. So let's talk a little bit about that specific type of warfare.
Well, it's important to say when talking about Iranian cyber warfare, you have the classical cyber warfare, using malwares to attack strategic sites or facilities or compounds. This is one important thing, that Iranian building their capabilities, everything's the beginning of the 2000 toward the 2010. But I wanted to focus on one other important aspect connected to the cyber warfare, and this is what we call the influence campaigns. And actually, you know, people tend to neglect that fact, looking only at the strategic activities or, let's say, something that, or dramatic activities like attacking nuclear plants or power plants or whatever. This is an important aspect, but what Iran is doing every day in Israel is trying to influence the Israeli population to increase the gaps within our population, making sure that at the end of the day it will weaken Israel, but also will pressure Israel to stop the war in Gaza. And this is what we're seeing now. We saw that years before. We're seeing that ever since the 7th of October. And we are not the only countries that are suffering from that. We have the U.S. Before the U.S. election, the American intel community already said that it's identifying Iranian activity within the social media platforms, trying to influence the election, the presidential election in the U.S. So I think in that regard, this is something important that we need to highlight, because at the end of the day, Iran is taking advantage of us being a democratic country and actually exploiting that to influence our civilians. And this is something that Israel needs to think hard and clear how to stop, how to counteract, how to protect the citizens, our citizens, the citizens of Israel, from this kind of negative influence.
Well, when Iran does see the social unrest inside Israel happening right now and some of the internal divides in society, it certainly does continue to try and paint Israel as weak. But is that really the case? Is Iran succeeding in this type of internal divide within Israeli society?
I think they are getting better and better. We in the INSS just published a couple of weeks ago an article on Iran activity, influence activities from the 7th of October. And what we see a couple of very negative trends. First, the advanced use of AI tools in order to attract people to build the confidence for the entities within the social media that they're operating, the avatars operating. This is one important thing. But even more scary is the fact that they are really know our, let's say, friction within our population. They know how to identify it, and they know how to exploit it. And the combination between advanced AI tools, very strong entities within the social media network, and them knowing our society, this combination is very problematic, because we see how they're taking that into their advantage. Now, I cannot say that they have influence in a way that they are forcing Israel to stop the war, but for them, it's an important tool in the puzzle to pressure Israel in that regard. And without putting some sort of line in the sand for the Iranians in that regard, they will continue pushing forward. And I'm afraid that given the fact that a lot of from the Israeli population actually absorbing the news from social media, it's easily to manipulate them. And we have multiple examples for that, unfortunately.
These are all the tangible threats that Israel has faced for years and continues to face right now. But arguably one of the greatest threats that Iran has is its nuclear capabilities that it continues to build. It continues to deny building those capabilities at the same time. But when it comes to the nuclear program that Iran is capable of, what type of really advancements are we talking about here?
That's a very important question, because I have something good to say and something bad to say. So let's try with the, let's say, a half glass full in that regard. Iran still doesn't possess nuclear weapons. It's important to say that. It's still far away in terms of even if the Iranian leadership will decide today to acquire nuclear capabilities in terms of weapons, it will still need a month, even a year, even more to acquire these capabilities. And why?
Not that much time.
It's not that much time. I agree with you, but the thing is that they don't have what we call a bomb in the cellar, meaning that it's not that they need a couple of days and they have a bomb. And why? Because we have to differentiate between two. In order to build a nuclear bomb, you need the fissile material coming from uranium or plutonium, and you need to know how to take that and build that into a nuclear device. What Iran has today, and this is unfortunately the glass is half empty, or the scary thing, is the fact that in terms of fissile material, they're already there. They can reach to 90% military-grade uranium tomorrow. They don't have any technical barriers to do so, unfortunately. But they're still lacking the capability to take the fissile materials and build that into a bomb. So we still have time, not much time, to stop them. Now, the problem is the fact that this program is indigenous. You know, when we cope with nuclear programs in the past, in Iraq and Syria, Iraq was a French one and the Syrian was a North Korean one. They didn't have any indigenous capabilities in order to build these capabilities. The Iranians built their own program. Yes, in the beginning, they used some blueprints of the Pakistanis, but from there on, it's only Iranian. And this is a major problem because even tomorrow, even the sites, the enrichment sites in Natanz and Fordow will disappear, the knowledge will be there. So the problem is that we have no good solution to stop the Iranian from advancing it. And it's important to mention that because we probably will speak about the new Iranian administration, but for sure the new President Pezeshkian will push for a nuclear agreement between Iran and the West. It won't be a JCPOA one, it will be a new one. And I think Israel needs to think hard and clear how to relate to this kind of development.
How do these nuclear agreements, and let's talk about what the West can do, because Israel in itself combating Iran, that's not enough. There needs to be different regional partnerships, specifically with the United States and other Western parties. We've seen nuclear deals, nuclear agreements in the past. Is this something that actually is able to tamper Iran's nuclear capabilities?
I think looking in hindsight to the 2015 JCPOA, you understand the importance of the agreement. Now, I cannot say the agreement is a complete one or the perfect one. For sure, it has some problems. But basically, it rolled back the Iranian nuclear program, and we have to say that. And Iran abide by the agreement itself. It's important to say that and to emphasize about that because people tend to think, oh, the Iranians, they couldn't care less, they will try to bypass it. I'm not saying that the Iranians are not liars or whatever, but I think in terms of lifting the sanction over Iran, this is something extremely important for the regime itself. The Iranians, yes, they are a strong country, they're an advanced country, but they suffer from multiple problems, mainly the economical ones. And I think the administration, the regime in Iran, understand completely that without lifting the sanctions, their economical future is dire. So in that regard, they have to reach an agreement, and they have to abide by the agreement. Now, for sure, we have to reach a new agreement that will significantly roll back Iran in the nuclear program. But I need to emphasize one important thing, or how I see things, that we shouldn't push back on any nuclear or any political solution. A political solution can help us roll back Iranian nuclear program. I cannot say any, or you can. I don't think that we should accept any solution in that regard. But a good solution that will include some important element that will really roll back this program, I think this is something that we can live with towards the future. In the end of the day, as I mentioned from the beginning of the discussion on the nuclear agreement or the nuclear program of Iran, there is no perfect solution for the situation that we are right now. And I think the political one is something that can help us depending on the content of it.
And how does the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, play into this? He is seen as more of a moderate than his predecessor, but how much say does the Iranian president even have when it comes to these major decisions?
It's the million-dollar questions in terms of the importance of the president. I want to say a couple of things about that. Yes, for sure, for the strategic decision-making in Iran, the last decision-maker is Khamenei, the supreme leader. It is important to say that. But the president still holds a lot of influence. And why? He is the head of what we call the SCNS, the Supreme National Security Council of Iran. This council actually offer to the Supreme Leader ways to act in relations to strategic developments, like nuclear deal. So I think in that regard, the fact that the President is heading this kind of important body gives him a lot of influence. This is one. Second, he has his cabinet. And we saw how Pezeshkian actually nominated for the position of Foreign Minister Arakshi, that actually was a part of the negotiations or Iran negotiation team in the JCPOA. Why it's so important? Because they have the experience, they have the knowledge, and obviously Arakshi, together with the Deputy President, Mr. Zarif, both of them will push, together with the President itself, for a nuclear deal. Now, I cannot say that whether the Supreme Leader will agree or not agree to any deal, but I think the fact that he's controlling the SCNS, the fact that he understands that there is a need to lift the sanctions, and the fact that his team that he brought together with him are experienced one in terms of understanding negotiating with the West regarding any nuclear deal towards the future, this is something that I think is an opening for a possible another nuclear deal towards the future. Again, we cannot know for sure what will happen, but I think the possibility of reaching that agreement are extremely high, given or since Pezeshkian was elected. The previous one, Raisi, that died in a helicopter crash, was a very conservative president, and I think that it was very hard for him to negotiate with the West, and I think that Pezeshkian bring a new spirit. For sure, it has a lot of barriers also in interacting with the US, but also domestic barriers interacting with the extreme elements of the regime, especially the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. But I think in the end of the day, given the fact that he is putting that, prioritizing that as first and foremost for his presidency, I assume that there will be a serious endeavor from his part in order to reach this kind of an agreement.
Danny, as we're talking about the different capabilities and different warfare that Iran has, I want us to go back to October 7th as well. During the Hamas massacre on southern Israel, Iran has really painted this attack as a way to try and rally the different proxies, unite the different forces, all with the shared goal of continuing to weaken Israel while it's down. What has really changed in Iran's strategy following post-October 7th?
Again, an important question, and I have to emphasize one important thing. We still don't know. Meaning that
a year later, we still don't know.
We don't know because the Iranians still don't know, because things are evolving and changing. And we can see, for example, the difference between how they reacted in the April 14th attack and how they reacted after the killing of Hania. So in that regard, why it's happening, I'll try to go a little bit in reverse and just to explain how Iran reacted to the 7th of October events. At the end of the day, the Iranians were caught by surprise. They probably knew something will happen because there are close connection between Quds Force and Hamas. But I think they were caught by surprise in terms of 7th of October. Nobody knew, I think, except the Hamas leadership that this is going to happen on the 7th of October. But from the beginning of the events, they took a strategic decision, actually two strategic decisions. One, to save Hamas, because Hamas is an important element within what we call the Iranian threat network and the circle of fire around Israel. But second, Iran won't intervene directly. And why? Iran only will push the proxies to intervene. Houthis, Shiite militias in Iraq, and Hezbollah. And why? The Iranians, as I said from day one, they think about how to secure the revolution towards the future. They believe that if they will intervene directly in a war against Israel, the US will come to Israel help, and at the end of the day, they will find themselves in a war against the US. And for the Iranians, war with the US put them in a grave, grave danger towards the future. So they prefer to stay in the back and just helping the proxies in that regard. So this is what happened until the April 14th events when Israel killed Hassan Madavi. For the Iranians, it was a breach of sovereignty in terms of what they said, the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And of course, he was a very senior guy connected to Khamenei, connected to Nasrallah. So they had to retaliate. But now we see that after Hania assassination, the Iranians blame Israel, but they still didn't retaliate for them. Even more so, they didn't join Hezbollah when he retaliated for the death or for the killing of Chukor, what we call the chief of staff of Hezbollah
in Beirut.
In Hezbollah in Beirut. And why? I think they were quite deterred from the American presence within the region. So what it says to us is actually the Iranians, and I think this is another element that's important to emphasize, they're a realpolitik country. Yes, they have extreme vision, but when it comes to choose between ideology and actual practical activities or political activities that actually contradict this ideology, if it will serve the interest of the revolution, they will choose something that contradicts the ideology. This is why the Supreme Leader was willing to allow the Iranian delegations to interact with the U.S. delegation in terms of the JCPOA for the JCPOA. And this is why we see them very hesitant to retaliate against Israel after Haniya assassination, despite the fact that they threaten Israel constantly in that regard. I'm not saying they're not going to retaliate towards the future, but the fact that they didn't retaliate until now shows that the Iranians can be deterred. And this is another aspect that we have to remember. They're extreme, but in the end of the day, we're able to influence them. And the issue of carrots and sticks is an important element in that regard. And that's something that I think we need to remember towards the future when discussing Iran's activity, regional one, but also in relation to the nuclear aspect and other aspects.
So it seems Iran will continue, at least for the foreseeable future right now, to leave the main war up to its proxies. We're talking about Hamas, we're talking about Hezbollah, we're talking about the Houthis in Yemen. In your opinion, which of these pose the greatest threat towards Israel? Right now, it certainly seems like Hezbollah in Lebanon, but we've seen some more and more capabilities coming out of the Houthis in Yemen as well earlier in this week, firing a ballistic missile that was able to go past the Israeli air defense systems and make it into Israeli airspace.
Definitely. The main problem that we have from the Iranian aspect, that the Iranian military industry actually has two production lines, one for the Iranian army, the Atesh and the RGC, and one for the proxies. And when you're given a proxy like the Houthis, that their decision-making process is problematic in a way. Given strategic abilities, they're able to block Bab el-Mandeb Strait and shoot missiles against Israel, even reaching Tel Aviv. And this is something that Israel will have to work together with our friends in the region and the US to prevent this kind of force buildup, because we see what's happening regarding the Houthis. Now, the Houthis are a threat, the Shiite militias are a threat, but no one's is a threat to Israel like Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a bigger threat to Israel even than Iran itself, because of its sheer firepower, the fact that it's very close to Israel, geographically speaking, it knows Israel, Hezbollah and Israel fought in the past, and I think this is a very grave danger to Israel. This is why we are facing now, after all the events that happened in the last couple of days, we're on the pager and everything, and I will see, we have the speech of Nasrallah, and I'm assuming that he will threaten a serious response against Israel in that regard. So I think that we are on a very grave danger in terms of a war with Hezbollah, and this is also connected to Iran. A war with Hezbollah will, at the end of the day, will involve Iran somehow, because it will be a fierce war. The Iranians will have to help the Hezbollah in that regard. They have to preserve Hezbollah, because for Iran, Hezbollah is the most important element that deter Israel from attacking Iran. This is why they will have to help Hezbollah. And then if the Iranians will come to Iran to Hezbollah help, for sure we'll see probably the US entering, helping Israel in that regard. So the war between Israel and Hezbollah can quickly turn into a regional war, assuming that also the Houthis and the Shiite militias in Iraq would try to help Hezbollah. So what now we are on the verge, not only on a serious escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, but also between Israel and the ITN and Iranian and the US presence in the region. So we look at it in a broader picture. But I think it's important to say that the Iranians will continue helping the ITN, the proxies into the future. And the day after the war, Israel need to think, together with the US and our friends in the region, how to disconnect the connection between Iran and the proxies, how to weaken the proxies, because without Iranian help in terms of the kinetic help, the sending the weapons, and of course everything related to the ideological support, without that, the proxies will be very weak. This is something that we have to think hard and clear toward the future after the war.
So briefly, let's talk about that future. What exactly should Israel be doing right now to secure its future and start to really diminish the threat against Iran?
Well, I think it's also related to the fact that I think that Israel need to, everything related to Iran, we need to work within a coalition. And there is nothing that will deter Iran more than a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is crucial element in the Israel ability to build a coalition. We saw in the events of 14th of April how important was the coalition headed by the US, but also included Jordan and Saudi Arabia, that protect Israel from the Iranian attack. And this is something that we have to duplicate towards the future. Now, the key for that is, of course, reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. That will allow us also the calm situation in our northern border, but I think it will allow us a platform to interact with the Saudis. Yes, Israel will have to show some sort of political future regarding the Palestinian issue. We saw what MBS said a couple of days ago in that regard. But if we want to build a coalition, a strong coalition that actually will deter Iran, we have to remember, as we started from our discussion regarding the importance of the proxies, distancing the war from Iran, coalition between Israel and Saudi Arabia, together with the other moderate states, actually put a grave danger to Iran, because Iran sees it as a threat to its own borders. This is why we have to work together to build this kind of coalition, and the key is reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. I think, again, I think that the negative development will be that Israel will stay alone, will be the spearhead in the war against Iran. This is the wrong thing to do. Iran is not only Israel problem. It's an international problem, and we have to keep it as an international one. Of course, we have to push the international community to take actions against Iranian nuclear capabilities, conventional force buildup, Iran sending arms to the proxies. But first and foremost, we have to work within a coalition. We see right now how Israel is really challenging in terms of fighting 7 fronts. In order to better improve our odds in that regard, we have to work within a coalition. And normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is a key for this kind of coalition.
It certainly seems like there can be a lot more to be done, all while Israel continues to fight all of the different octopus legs, let's say, when it comes to Iran. But is there still, quickly, we're wrapping this up, but a quick message of hope that you would say? Do you believe that Israel has the capabilities to win against Iran?
I'll start by message hope, saying that I don't think that this regime will last for, again, centuries to come. I don't have any crystal ball. I don't know what will happen to the regime, but I think there is a growing distance between the population and the regime itself. And after Khamenei, when Khamenei will die, things will change dramatically within Iran. And we saw from the Iranian presidential election that at the end of the day, the Iranian population wants a change.
They want to see something else, and we want to see that here in Israel too. Danny Citrinowicz, thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the National Security Podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation, and to all of our listeners, make sure to tune us next week.